In this week's On My Shelf, I'm talking about Salman Rushdie's newest book, an Annie Dillard memoir, The Importance of Making a Plan for Every Day, my much-needed weekend without kids, and how I brainstorm plot. I'm really surprised that I've never read Salman Rushdie before, but I picked up his most recent book, 2 Years, 8 Months, and 28 Nights, because it was on the express shelf at my library. I actually picked it up by accident because, for some reason, I read the author's name as Sherman Alexie, who wrote The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian, and I was interested in reading a new book of his, but I'm glad I accidentally picked it up. It's hard to describe Rushdie's style. He is a masterful storyteller. 2 Years, 8 Months, and 28 Nights tells the story of the jinn, which were like genies in Arabian and Islamic mythology. But the way that Rushdie told this story was like a history of sorts. You had the feeling that you were reading a true account of how jinnies tried once to overtake the world and were defeated. Not only that, but the characters were weird and interesting and had distinct personalities of their own. It was a fantastically written book, although I will admit this one took me much longer to read than most books, probably because Rushdie has a very intellectual style, which I really enjoy. I don't remember if I've mentioned this, but I'm spending the entire year of 2016 studying the craft of memoir because I'm in the middle of writing a couple of my own. The most recent memoir I finished was Annie Dillard's An American Childhood. This memoir was so different than others I'd read because it was really sort of a celebration of a very happy childhood. One of the misperceptions around memoirs is that they have to be written by people who have gone through a terrible childhood or some crazy ordeal, but Dillard proves that it's not actually necessary. An American Childhood is an awakening book of sorts. Dillard goes through her childhood and her teen years, and it ends there, on the same happy note it began. What I loved most about it was her paragraph asides on what it's like to become more aware as you're growing up. She portrayed the awakening of a child to an adolescent, to a teen, so perfectly well. It was really a great read. I'm a planner. I enjoy knowing ahead of time what it is I need to do and what I'm writing and which projects I'll be working on for how long. At the end of last year, I mapped out the entire 2016 with all my project end dates on it. I overestimated, of course, so that I could leave myself a little wiggle room, but they are all scheduled and all have a place. I did not do this, though, on my regular blogs. I produce 6 blogs a week, so I found myself feeling a little overwhelmed and out of sorts one week, and then I decided I was going to schedule the next 7 weeks of blog posts. Not necessarily write them, but at least plan for them. And that's what I did. It feels so much better. I used to think that this didn't allow me as much open space to be creative, but I also spent more than a decade in journalism, where we function by an editorial calendar. So I, probably more than many, know the importance of planning ahead. If we didn't plan for a particular story, there wouldn't be room for it in the paper. And also, there wouldn't be pictures with it, and we couldn't get the necessary graphics we needed to make it a well-read story. The same is true in blogging. So I've been planning much farther ahead, and I feel like it's really made a difference. Obviously, if things come up that I feel I need to write about, I'll adjust my schedule, but for the most part, I plan about 7 weeks ahead. It feels great being on top of things, and when I sit down to write, I know exactly what needs writing. This weekend, my parents took all 6 of our boys, and my husband and I had time to reconnect and talk without taking a whole day to finish a sentence, and sleep in on Saturday without kids knocking on our door at 6 a.m. It's amazing what a weekend away from the kids does for parents. I feel so much more capable of connecting more deeply with my kids when I've had a little bit of time away. Every parent needs a break now and then because parenting is really hard, even though there are people in the world who would disagree. But it really is. I want to be a good parent, and part of being a good parent is taking the necessary time away to remember who you were before you had children. I love these weekends. My husband and I try really hard to take at least a weekend away once every quarter. I've been sharing my brainstorm process for stories. In episode 18, I shared about brainstorming characters, and in episode 19, I shared about brainstorming settings. This week, I wanted to talk about the plot line. There are different schools of thought out there. People who think brainstorming plot doesn't give our characters enough room to be themselves. And there are people who say that without a brainstorm, your story will feel hollow. I've done both. I've written a story without a brainstorm and just let my characters go where they want. And I've written stories where I've brainstormed the plot pretty extensively. And for me, the ones where I've brainstormed pretty extensively turn out to be the better stories. Here's the deal. If you know your characters and you know what they'll do and what they won't do, and if you know their motivations and what kind of philosophy they have about life and what they'd do for love or what they'd do for their mother, you basically already know the plot. So what it really boils down to is how much you know your characters. If you don't know them well, it doesn't matter how much time you brainstorm your plot. It's going to feel hollow. If you know them well, you could probably do a brainstorm or you could fly by the seat of your pants because either way, they're going to direct the show. Now, that said, what I typically do is I write a very brief overview of my story before I even begin writing. This helps later too if you're submitting to agents because you already have a synopsis. You know the main points of what's going to happen. Some people can write their stories from this brief synopsis. I like to take it a little further, but I'll share about that in next week's On My Shelf. The first step to my plot brainstorm is writing out the entire plot in no more than 1,000 words. It eliminates the starting line for me because now I've already started, which saves time in the long run. For more about me or my books, sign up for my email newsletter, where I share an inside look at life and projects I'm working on and the current novel of the year. If you have any questions about writing or books, or how I managed to run a writing career with 6 little ones, leave them in the comments and I'll get to them in future episodes. For more On My Shelf, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.